Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you, along with, in this overhead shot of interest, Joe Atkins. And it's funny, when I was Commissioner Joe Atkins, when I was researching material for this interview, I realized you've been coming here for over a dozen years now.
I think I used to have dark hair when I first started coming.
I think you might have. But you survived 14 years in the Minnesota legislature. You ran for election as county commissioner this past year. You were elected in competition, both a primary and a contested election for the post. How does it feel? What's different about being a county commissioner?
Well, and I'll tell you, Alan, I've got no complaints about being in the legislature. I was there for 14 years and loved it, had a productive time there, had a lot of great colleagues to work with. So you won't hear me complaining about...
You were one of the few people who got bipartisan legislation passed. I will say it's gotten really tougher and tougher over the years.
Yeah, it's gotten tougher, but it's just because it's harder doesn't mean that it's not still the right way to go. And it was challenging to do that, but you generally ended up with a better product. You know, when you listen to your opponents and you incorporate some of their ideas, you usually end up with a better outcome. But it's different on the county board because a lot of the partisan stuff is set aside at the door. I mean, everybody still has their general beliefs about how government should run and that kind of stuff. But it's 7 people literally trying to just solve problems.
And have done a good job over the years in this county, and I think will continue to do so, simply for that reason. Yeah. Low taxes. Everybody's certainly looking for low taxes.
Well, low taxes, Alan, is a relative term. I'm sure there's some folks across the county that think they're pretty high, but if you just look comparison-wise, we've got the lowest county taxes per person of any county in Minnesota. Literally out of 87 counties, we have the lowest taxes per person. But I'm sure there's still folks out there who wish they were even lower.
And a lot of services that are offered to the voters.
Yeah, you know where the credit really lies there, though. We've got just terrific employees at Dakota County. There's just something about the culture of working at Dakota County. We draw folks from the state of Minnesota, from other counties, from cities who want to work in Dakota County. Even though the number of employees that we have here are less than half on a per person basis, less than half per resident than other counties. Us in Carver County have the lowest number of employees per resident, and yet, as you noted, I mean, the services, when we do the customer service satisfaction type surveys, just off the charts,
Overwhelming,
90+% satisfaction rates, and so it's-
Similar here in Egan,
Yeah.
with again, nonpartisan city government.
but give the credit to the people who are actually doing the work. The electeds are great. I really enjoy working with the rest of the board, but you got to give credit where it belongs, and that's those employees that are doing it every day just do a great job.
Now, you're in the 4th District, and driving over here, Sharon and I were talking. In all the years that we live in Dakota County, we never had a commissioner who gave us biweekly bulletins. Joe Atkins does that.
You're complaining about it or what?
Joe Atkins does that. Being on top of issues is so important. I even got the latest one this morning. That's something that you do to keep in touch with the people. Another thing that you do that some of your predecessors did not do is you have listening sessions. You go around every couple of weeks to every city in the district for listening sessions with your constituents. And that's giving more
Well, or
to your...
might just be a signal that I'm not real bright.
Well,
'cause
maybe,
I tell you, I get more out of, I send out in fact, I had to send one today because I was going to be on your show. So I had to send out one of those e-updates. But I try to send them every couple or 3 weeks. And what I so much benefit from, though, is it's sort of like crowdsourcing information. I send out my updates, but I'll do surveys as part of those oftentimes. I had a survey on the one that I sent out today. The information that I get back is just golden. I mean, it's like I have about 6,000 people on that list. I get the expertise of 6,000 people. That doesn't mean they have to be chemists or engineers but these are my bosses. And if you don't know what your bosses want you to do, it's a little hard to do it. And then the listening sessions are the same thing. I mean, some folks would rather not type it into a computer. They'd actually like to look you in the eye and talk to you.
Well, I think it's important to have that feeling with your legislator that, number one, he's talking to you.
Or a commissioner, for that matter.
Or commissioner. Well, you are legislators in a fashion that he is interested enough. And I will say, because I've mentioned it before, that with our current congressman, we can't do anything to get him either here, been invited many times, or into a listening session or even a talking session. He prefers telephone, where they can select any questions and not talk to people who have a differing view. And it's interesting because I did AM 950 last week, and the first thing we did, I had our producer call Congressman Lewis's office, and I got a nice young intern, and I said, "Where does the congressman stand on this? Where does the congressman?" And this young man just couldn't answer any of these questions, but he took them down, and I said, "Can you get back to me on these things?" And he said, "Yes, we will." Well, of course, it's only 8 days now, but I haven't heard anything further, and I won't. That's such a different approach to governing than what you have.
Well, I got to tell you, I like the back and forth, and I know some folks don't really, they don't like that as much as I do. I really, and even in today's update that I sent out, some of the comments that I got during those listening sessions were not positive. I mean, they were things like, your website isn't real great, and they gave me some suggestions on how. But if you don't have that back and forth, you can't ask more questions and find out, well, what part of the website, for example, don't you like? What part is not functioning
it's part
very
of
well?
representing people, I would think, but apparently, some people
Everybody
don't.
has their own style, I guess. But another Cliff and Dodd, just to talk real tangible sorts of. There's challenging safety issues at Cliff and Dodd, traffic issues, and I've been back and forth with interacting with folks about getting suggestions on what would be good improvements there. That's hard if you're only doing it one way.
Yeah.
If I can't ask follow-up questions and have a little back and forth with folks, so I just find it more valuable that way.
So there is some consideration, you have told me, and I didn't know that before we came in, about Uber being licensed in this county.
Well, we've Uber's licensed and active in the county. What we've started, we just applied for a waiver, an opportunity to use Uber for transporting folks in Dakota County, and what we've, pardon that, what we're talking about is by state requirement, we have to transport certain folks to and from work, people that have disabilities and things like that. And currently we use a service at about $26 a trip, and sometimes they don't show up on time, and sometimes it doesn't work out so well. So we actually asked the state if we can use Uber or Lyft at about $6 a trip or $10 a trip. They show up on time, they're more cost effective. That's what I love about working at Dakota County, is that they're willing to try new things, they're willing to innovate, whether others are doing it or not. They try new things in Dakota County, and hopefully it works.
Well, hopefully it will. I have reservations about Uber myself in terms of certainly the cities that they're in, because in my experience, most of the cab drivers are immigrants. And Uber is driving some of them out of business. And I say that even though my son was an Uber driver for a while.
Now, see, we have such limited taxi cab service here in Dakota County.
It's
It's hard to get a cab.
A little bit different here in Dakota County. I'm thinking of, I just saw that in New York City, Uber has now surpassed the yellow cab in business.
Really?
And I'm thinking all those people, some of whom paid $1 million for the medallion, how they used to, and went bankrupt because of Uber. So,
Yeah, although my last Lyft driver was a former cab driver, he loved working for Lyft as opposed to being a cab driver. So
if they're happy. So what other issues are really facing us?
well, you know, right now we're in that period of the year where we're starting to work on the budget for 2018. I shouldn't even say starting. I guess we've been at it since June, and so we've been literally going through almost line by line all of the various county budget items. We've set the preliminary levy, which, as you know, by law can only go down. We've set it at a 1.9% increase, which would be about $8 on the average home. Not $8 a month, $8 a year.
$8 for the year.
So about 75 cents a month would be the increase at the county level. Right now, we're about $416 lower on average than any other county in the metro area. And we're confident that we're going to keep it that way, because every other county in the metro that set their limit, their preliminary levy, is higher than we are right now. So we're going to keep in that same position.
Well,
So we're working on
things
budget.
do get more expensive. Salaries have to go up if you want to keep good people, and that's one of the things that we have been able to do, is keep good people in the jobs.
But that's one of the biggest challenges we have, though, is that you're competing with everybody to get good employees. We've got a well-earned reputation for being a great place to work, where you can really get a lot done. So we generally get a lot more applicants than some other counties, but it's still a challenge. One of the advantages, though, that we've got in terms of setting our budget is we've paid off all of our debt. So we don't have, I think the average amount of debt in the 7-county area is $204 million, is what their debt is. So just to pay the interest on the debt in those other counties costs a bunch of money that we don't have to pay anymore, because we paid off all of our debt.
Well, that is a very, very important statistic.
And a pretty unique one.
Yes, very unique.
We haven't been able to find, there's probably a couple other counties across the state that have no debt. We haven't been able to find them yet, though. And apparently it's quite rare around the country as well to be debt-free.
Especially at this point in our society, yeah. Now, I know one of the hot button issues is sex offender housing. That's something that you deal with on a local level.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen, I believe we've got 4 communities now in Dakota County that have revised.
NIMBY, not in my backyard, right.
Well, I mean, and you gotta, I mean, in fairness, you gotta understand why people are concerned. I mean, the sex offender housing that we're talking about, is sex offender ordinances, generally apply to level 3 offenders, the most likely to reoffend.
Right.
So you've got some cities, Inver Grove, literally just in the last few weeks, was looking at a change in their ordinance that would have allowed sex offenders to live any place they wanted to in town, regardless of whether it was close to a school or playground or church, if it was with an immediate family member. And folks showed up in hordes at their city council meeting in opposition to that for that very reason. They didn't want a level 3 sex offender living directly across from a church or a school or a playground or a park. So yeah, it's a challenge. And I think there's now 4 cities in Dakota County that have done some alteration, some allowing level 3 sex offenders to live with immediate family. Part of that is prompted by, you're probably familiar, there's some cases in Wisconsin where lawyers on behalf of the offenders have sued certain cities. I believe one was Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, that had a 3,000-foot limit, a requirement between level 3 sex offender and
Which
church
in that
park and
area
school.
of Wisconsin means it would put it outside the
Basically
city
meant
limits.
that they could live in one hotel on the far outskirts of, and I might add, Inver Grove, I was mayor there when we adopted it. We adopted an ordinance for strip clubs that would have only allowed, there's one strip club that was grandfathered in. We adopted an ordinance that would only allow a strip club to be basically located on top of the landfill at the very southern, by the refinery. Otherwise, we didn't want any more strip clubs. Whether that's constitutional or not, I don't know, Alan, but we didn't want any more strip clubs. We adopted a pretty strict ordinance, and that's what a lot of cities have done with sex offenders,
Yeah.
but they're now facing constitutional questions or scrutiny, and some of those statutes are getting knocked down.
Now, I don't know if this falls on a county level or not, but I just read an article about a fellow who was just arrested for his 28th DUI, drunk driving. How is a person walking in the streets having been convicted 27 times? And we know what a problem that is. That plus distracted driving. People who insist on texting and talking on the phone, it drives me crazy when I see them. I will honk and try to get their attention, and they usually respond with a one-finger salute. But the fact of the matter is, these are really, really dangerous acts in terms of other people. And I don't know how far county jurisdiction goes in that regard.
Well, not very far, but the legislature, there are plans by at least a couple legislators to take up some greater restrictions on folks being able to repeat DWI offenders. I think one of the proposals I saw was that if you got to 5, it meant no more license. That strikes me as, frankly, even a little too high. If you've got to 5, you've probably driven drunk about 5,000 times. To the extent that the county has a role in that, county attorney, county sheriff, obviously, we handle, we don't have 6,000 DWIs, but we've had 6,000 criminal cases in 2016, the most recent figures. Juvenile delinquency, DWIs, it's a pretty active, our county attorney, county sheriff are pretty actively engaged in trying to reduce the number of DWIs in Dakota County.
We have a county sheriff here, by the way, who has introduced drones into his operation. Probably others around the state, but Tim Leslie, who was really on the cutting edge of things that are going to help improve law enforcement.
It is a really sophisticated, I mean, they're hard-working besides, but it's a really sophisticated sheriff's department. And we've got an electronic crimes task force that's won multiple awards for bringing our cities together with the county to try to fight some of the most difficult crimes to fight, which are those that are electronically based, either those crazy calls that you get or the computer-based, lots of folks impersonating others to use to scam folks. They've been on the cutting edge of the drone technology. We were among the first, you can use that for searches, you can do it, there's any number of thoughtful purposes that you can use the drone technology for. So it's
There
been
was
good to
just
work
an
with them.
interesting article this week about a little 2-year-old boy who got lost, and the heat seeker in a helicopter, I think it was State Patrol,
Yeah.
that spotted him with his dog, happened to be an English Springer, which is near and dear to my heart. And because of the dog and the dog's movement, this little kid was lost for quite a few hours in a cornfield, and they were able to go in and save him.
Yeah, it's amazing how much, it used to be you'd literally get a bunch of folks on foot, and you still do, and people go, step by step. But with the drones, the infrareds, and it's amazing the amount of ground that they can cover.
Yeah. Scary in a way, but also really, really beneficial if used right.
Yeah. Well, and we've got pretty strict privacy policies at the county about how you can use and who can have access and all those sorts of things as well. Because in the wrong hands or used inappropriately, obviously it's not a good thing. But as long as those tools are used well, they can be really effective.
Farm production. People don't think of us as really anything but a suburban county, but as a matter of fact, we have a large farming area here in Dakota County. How are we treating our farmers? And
well, and you got to give our credit. I think we're still roughly half rural. And when I used to tell my legislative colleagues that up in St. Paul, that, come down to Dakota County, we got soybeans and corn and horses and cows, very few would believe me until we actually got them out here. I think on a per acreage basis, we produce more soybeans in Dakota County than anybody else, and it just blows people's minds. Our Farm Bureau celebrated 100th anniversary recently. We've honored a number of farm families in Dakota County. Farm Family of the Year, I think, in Minnesota came from Dakota County. So as you drive around the northern portions of Dakota County, you wouldn't believe it. But quite a bit is still
different
still rural.
needs for your suburban homeowner and your farmer, however.
Yeah.
And you've got to meld those together somehow to make it a cohesive county. And somehow or other, Dakota County has done that.
Well, the neat thing, though, is I think those of us, and I have a very unique kind of district because the Inver Grove, Egan, Rosemount has all of that. We have almost urban, very suburban, but we also have some of the rural pieces. So for me, it's very easy to embrace. And we're also home to CHS. The international headquarters is in my district. So a lot of rural sorts of connections. But it's also nice to see commissioners who have no rural portion of the county in their district, but very much value the areas that do. And it's a nice,
And it's fortunate
nice cooperative
because
effort.
family farms are shrinking and they're being bought up by these big mega corporations. And I don't like to see that just from a psychological aspect, something about America and farming that's really special and part of our fabric. So that there have been some scams also that have been prevalent in the county in terms of I've got a warrant for your arrest, etc.
That was probably the one that I found most offensive.
And
I get that there's scams. Every time my mom picks up the phone these days, it seems like it's some scam call. So she's just stopped answering unless she sees on the caller ID that
we
it's
pretty
something.
much have done the same thing.
Yeah, that's
And
a smart
I had
move.
one of those warrant scams.
Yeah, and that one, the reason I find that one the most offensive is because they're using the name of a Dakota County deputy to try to wrangle out of somebody. They say that there's a warrant out, you've got to pay a certain fine. They try to keep you on the phone, literally to take you down to wire some money at the drugstore or Walmart.
Yeah,
or
that's
wherever.
what they try. I said to this fellow, gee, I'll get the money if you can come here and pick it up. And he wasn't about to do that. So when I got off the phone with him with his callback number, I immediately called the sheriff's office, and they actually got on that one right away, and I think put a stop to that one.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing, though, is
a lot of people,
many of the callback numbers are ghost numbers.
Yeah.
They look like they're local, and in fact, they're someplace in Eastern Europe, or they're in Africa, and they're making the call from there, which makes it particularly hard, obviously, to go after them.
But
how long did you keep him on the line? I'm guessing you probably had that guy on the line for
we
half
were
an
on
hour
for
or so.
like 2.5, 3 minutes minimum, and how's the weather where you are and things like that. Well, I'm right here in the county. Sergeant, whatever his name was, of the Royal Mounted Police. No, allegedly of our office, but. That was one where we were able to do it, but a lot of seniors are vulnerable in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and everybody, there's a misconception that, you know, people who fall for these scams are somehow stupid or really naive. The fact is, a lot of these scammers are really, I mean, they are really, really good at what they do.
They're pros.
And they've got some basic information about you to begin with. But you know, there's certain triggers. I mean, if they're trying to keep you on the line and they're trying to get you to wire money, wiring money in particular is one of the big red flags. But just, you know, keep an eye out for variations, because there's always some new variant of how they're seeking to do it. But I took particular offense that they were trying to use the Dakota County Sheriff's Office as
A lot of other things that are on this list, and not the least of which is the Vikings, that we're not going to get to in this interview, which means, unfortunately for you, that you have to come back here and be subjected to this again. But let's talk about the Vikings. It's going to be a whole different area of Eagan that's going to have 5 or 6 football fields and a headquarters and a hotel, and all within our and within your area.
Potentially 7.5 miles of trails and a variety of things that people, you know, whether you're a fan of the Vikings or not, they're also doing a whole campus that's going to be open to the public. Expect a number of restaurants and bars and things like that, but also expect that there's upwards of 60 to 100,000 people that are going to show up for training camp.
That's right.
So you've got Eagan, Inver Grove Heights, Mendota Heights, Sunfish Lake are all looking at the traffic impacts.
And I know, already interviewing for a couple of additional police positions.
Yeah.
So that
that's
another problem.
Not just the Vikings that are going on. It's Prime Therapeutics, and it's an area that's likely to see rampant growth in the next couple of years. So a lot of stuff going on in that neighborhood.
Not much area left for growth here.
If
we leave the farms alone.
Right, not so much in Eagan, but if you cross over, you know, and you know, the boundary is just sort of an arbitrarily drawn line anyway. But in Inver Grove, there's about 3,000 acres yet that is undeveloped and lies right along just south of 494. So anticipate you're going to see a lot of growth coming out of that part of both Eagan and Inver Grove.
And I can see that we're really down to our last minute. One thing I really want to mention, this program, which started in 1999, has been fueled by the talent of our volunteers. And we have them here today. That's what makes it go. And the city of Eagan, the employees of the city of Eagan have been of immeasurable help. Plus our sponsors, and sometimes we forget to honor them, and I really want to make it a point to really point out those people who make it easy for me. I'm just a pretty face in front of the camera. They're the ones that really make it. Why are you laughing at that?
Because I agree so wholeheartedly. You're such a handsome fellow.
Yeah.
But those folks are the ones that really
Commissioner
do the work.
Atkins, Dakota County Commission, 4th District. As usual, my thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.